The stench of sulfur and ash clung to everything in the Imperial stables. Jack had long stopped noticing it. 3 years of scrubbing dragon scales, mucking out nests, and staying invisible had taught him that much. In the draconic sovereignty, humans like him were called softskins, and softskins who kept their heads down lived longer. The massive crimson drake in stall 47 barely acknowledged him as he worked. Dragons rarely noticed humans unless they made mistakes. Jack had learned not to make mistakes. His hands moved mechanically across the dragon's scales, the rough bristles of his brush catching on the edges where old scales were ready to shed. The drake's breathing was slow and steady, a rumbling sound that vibrated through Jack's chest even from several feet away. "Move faster, Softskin," Commander Vex snarled from the stable entrance, his silver scales gleaming in the artificial light. The Drake rider tossed Jack another bucket of polish. "The Grand WYIM arrives within the hour. Everything must be perfect." Jack caught the bucket without looking up. "Yes, Commander." The words came automatically. 3 years of practice had taught him exactly how much emotion to strip from his voice. Too much fear and they'd think you were weak. Too little and they'd think you were defiant. Either way could get you killed. He moved to the next stall, where an older dragon rested on a bed of heated stones. Her golden scales had lost their shine years ago, dulled by time and neglect. This one was different from the others. Sometimes, when Jack cleaned her stall, she would watch him with eyes that seemed almost sad. Like she remembered something from long ago. Jack dipped his brush into the polish and reached up toward her shoulder. The dragon shifted slightly, and that's when it happened. Her talon caught his forearm. It wasn't aggressive, just a small movement, but the edge was sharp enough to slice through his work uniform and into his skin. Pain flared hot and immediate. Jack bit back a curse and stumbled backward. Blood welled up from the cut, dark red against his pale skin. He pressed his other hand against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding, but drops were already falling to the stone floor. The blood hit something Jack had always thought was just decorative stonework. Carved circles and strange symbols that covered parts of the stable floor. Nobody had ever told him what they meant. Nobody told stable hands anything. The moment his blood touched those ancient markings, the world changed. The old golden dragon's head snapped toward him. Her eyes, which had been dull and tired just seconds ago, suddenly blazed with an intensity that made Jack's breath catch in his throat. She made a sound he'd never heard from any dragon before. Not a roar. Not a growl. It was something else entirely. Something that sounded almost like a sob of recognition. Then the other dragons started. Every single dragon in the compound went silent first. The usual sounds of the stables, the breathing and shifting and occasional grumbles, all stopped at once. The silence was so complete that Jack could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Then, slowly, every dragon head turned in his direction. Jack felt their eyes on him. Dozens of massive predators, each one capable of tearing him apart without effort, all staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. Then they began to bow. The old golden dragon lowered her massive head until her snout nearly touched the ground. The crimson drake in stall 47 did the same. One by one, like a wave spreading through the compound, every dragon bowed their heads low. "What have you done?" Commander Vex's voice had changed completely. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something Jack had never heard from any of the dragon riders before. It sounded like fear. Pure, unfiltered fear. The Drake rider stared at Jack with wide eyes. "What did you do?" Jack opened his mouth to answer, but no words came out. His arm was still bleeding. His blood was still dripping onto those ancient symbols on the floor. And every dragon in sight was bowing to him like he was someone important. That's when the sky went dark. Jack looked up through the open roof of the stable complex. Something huge was blocking out the sun. A shadow fell across everything, cold and vast. Then he saw it descending. A dragon easily 3 times the size of any dragon he'd ever seen. Its scales were deep black, but they weren't just black. They had veins of silver running through them that pulsed with light, like captured starlight flowing through the dragon's body. The ground shook when it landed. The impact sent tremors through Jack's legs, nearly knocking him off his feet. Stable tools clattered to the ground. Nearby horses in the outer pens screamed in terror. This had to be the Grand WYM. The eldest dragon in the known galaxy. The one who supposedly hadn't left his mountain home in over 100 years. And he had come here. For Jack. The dragon's presence was overwhelming. Jack wanted to run, wanted to hide, wanted to do anything except stand there frozen in place. But his body wouldn't obey. He could only watch as the massive creature's head lowered, coming closer and closer until one enormous eye was level with Jack's face. That eye was ancient beyond understanding. Looking into it was like staring into the depths of space itself. Then the impossible happened. The Grand Wym bowed his head. Just like all the others. This ancient being, this creature of legend that kings and emperors feared, lowered his head to a stable boy. When Ash spoke, his voice didn't come from his mouth. It resonated through the air itself, through Jack's bones, through his very soul. The Covenant remembers, the dragon said. The bloodline endures. The dragon's deep archive was a place Jack didn't know existed. Hidden within a hollowed asteroid in deep space, it housed thousands of dragons who had withdrawn from the sovereignty centuries ago. Ancient ones, too old and too wise to serve Rita's corrupted dynasty. The journey here had been terrifying. One moment Jack was standing in the chaos of the Imperial stables with dragons bowing around him, the next he was on Ash's back, flying higher and faster than he'd ever imagined possible. The planet fell away beneath them. The stars grew brighter. And then they'd entered a jump portal that twisted Jack's stomach into knots. Now he stood in a cavern so massive he couldn't see the far wall. Dragons rested on ledges carved into the rock, their scales glinting in the soft blue light that seemed to come from the stone itself. Some of these dragons looked even older than Ash. Their scales were cracked and faded. Their eyes held the weight of centuries. They told us humans were conquered 3,000 years ago, Jack said, staring at the holographic displays showing humanity's true history. The images floated in the air before him, showing scenes he'd never seen in any history book. Humans and dragons walking side by side. Not as masters and servants. As equals. They told us we lost a war. A lie, Ash rumbled beside him. An older dragon named Ember, her scales like cooling lava, manipulated the displays with practiced ease. Her claws moved through the holographic controls as if she'd done this 1,000 times before. Humans were never conquered. You surrendered willingly. Why would we do that? Jack couldn't tear his eyes away from the images. In one scene, a human woman stood beside a massive blue dragon, and between them was a visible thread of light connecting their bodies. In another, human children played with young dragons, laughing together without fear. Ember's ancient eyes met his. Because you are better than us. Jack turned to face her fully. What? Watch, Ash said gently, and the hologram shifted. The new images showed something different. A great gathering of humans and dragons together. Thousands of them, maybe millions, all assembled in some vast open space. The humans wore clothing that looked ceremonial, decorated with symbols Jack didn't recognize. The dragons around them were magnificent, their scales bright and vibrant. This was the Covenant, Ember explained. Her voice carried a sadness that made Jack's chest ache. 10,000 years ago, humanity and dragonkind discovered something remarkable. Humans possess the ability to bond with our consciousness. To bridge the gap between our minds and yours. The hologram showed it happening. A human man placed his hand on a dragon's scales, and that thread of light appeared between them. But it wasn't one-directional. The light flowed both ways, pulsing like a heartbeat. Together, we were unstoppable, Ash continued. Dragons provided the strength and the power. Humans provided something we never had. Innovation. Adaptability. The ability to see solutions we'd never considered. We ruled the galaxy together, not through force, but through partnership. Then what happened? Jack asked. He noticed his hands were shaking. Everything he'd been taught his entire life was wrong. Everything. Humanity grew uncomfortable, Ember said softly. The hologram changed again, showing what looked like debates. Humans arguing with each other while dragons watched. Your species began to question whether it was right to have such influence over sentient beings. Even though we entered the bond willingly, even though we wanted it, humans started to fear it was a form of control. The next images hurt to watch. Jack saw humans removing ornate collars from around their necks. Not slave collars. These looked precious, decorated with gems and precious metals. Symbols of honor. Of the bond they shared with dragons. They walked away, Jack whispered. Your ancestors dissolved the covenant, Ash confirmed. His voice was heavy with old grief. They erased their own history. Scattered themselves across the galaxy to live as equals among all species. They wanted to prove they didn't need power over others to be worthwhile. The hologram showed dragons watching as humans left. Some dragons were crying. Jack didn't even know dragons could cry, but he could see the tears, glittering like diamonds as they fell. You let them go, Jack said. We honored their choice, Ember replied. It broke us. For centuries, we waited, hoping they would return. But they never did. Eventually, We accepted that humanity had made their decision. We tried to move forward. But someone didn't, Jack guessed. Ash's growl was low and angry. Rita's dynasty rose 2,000 years after humans left. They came to power through violence and betrayal. The first thing they did was hunt down every remaining human who carried binder blood. The hologram shifted to show darker scenes. Jack turned away, not wanting to see the violence displayed there. They rewrote history, Ember continued. Told everyone that humans had always been servants. That they'd lost some great war. They enslaved your species and made sure no one would ever know the truth. Jack felt something building inside his chest. It wasn't just anger, though there was plenty of that. It was something else. A feeling like a second heartbeat that wasn't his own. He looked at Ash, and suddenly he could sense the dragon's presence in his mind. Not invasive. Welcoming. He felt Ash's ancient grief, his hope, his determination. You can feel me, Ash said with wonder in his voice. The bond is already beginning to wake inside you. Jack pressed his hand against his chest. What does this mean? It means you're not just a stable boy anymore, Ember said. You're a binder. The last of a bloodline that once walked beside us as equals. And if Rita discovers you're alive and awakening, she will stop at nothing to kill you. The first binder they found was a woman named Beth, working in a terraforming station on the Outer Rim. She didn't believe them until Jack took her hand and she felt Ember's consciousness brush against her own. Beth had collapsed, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by a connection she'd dreamed about her entire life without understanding why. I always felt incomplete, she whispered as Ember nuzzled her gently. Like something was missing. Now I know what. Jack understood exactly how she felt. He'd spent 3 years in those stables feeling like there was a hole in his chest he couldn't explain. A longing for something he'd never experienced. Now he knew it was the bond calling to him through his bloodline, waiting to be awakened. Beth worked in atmospheric processing, spending her days adjusting chemical balances in the air of a barely habitable moon. She was thin and tired-looking, with calluses on her hands from working with heavy machinery. When Ash and Jack had landed near her station, she thought they were there to arrest her. That's how humans lived now. Always afraid. Always expecting the worst. But when Jack explained who they were and what she might be, Beth had laughed. A bitter, disbelieving sound. You're telling me I'm some kind of ancient royalty? Look at me. I'm nobody. I process nitrogen levels for a living. That's what they want you to think, Jack had said. That's why they erased our history. So we'd never know what we really are. Now, 3 hours later, Beth sat beside Ember with her hand resting on the dragon's scales. The connection between them was visible as a faint shimmer in the air. She couldn't stop smiling even through her tears. The second binder they found was Tom, a freighter pilot who'd been transporting supplies between worlds. Tom was older than Jack, maybe 40, with gray starting to show in his hair. He had the look of someone who'd spent his whole life just trying to survive. When Reed, a sleek green dragon with sharp intelligent eyes, had first approached him, Tom had pulled a weapon. Stay back, he'd shouted. I'm licensed to carry cargo, nothing else. I haven't broken any laws. It took an hour of talking before Tom agreed to even listen. But when he finally placed his hand on Reed's scales, something incredible happened. Every navigation system on Tom's ship went crazy. Screens lit up with data flowing faster than any computer could process. Tom's eyes went wide. I can see through his eyes, Tom said, his voice shaking with wonder. While flying. We don't need instruments. We just know where to go. The dragon's senses and my piloting skills working together. By the end of the first month, they'd found 7 binders scattered across the outer colonies. Each one was living a small, quiet life. Each one felt that same inexplicable emptiness that Jack and Beth had felt. And each awakening was different, revealing new aspects of what the bond could do. A woman named Grace discovered she could sense the emotions of entire groups of dragons at once. She'd been a counselor before, helping traumatized humans cope with their servitude. Now she sat in their stolen ship's cargo hold, eyes closed, describing what dozens of dragons across the system were feeling. Fear. Confusion. Hope. She could feel it all. Luke, a medical technician from a mining colony, found he could heal the damage caused by years of abuse. When he touched a scarred dragon who'd been whipped for disobedience, the old wounds began to fade. Not instantly, but visibly. The dragon had wept with relief. Anna was the youngest of them, barely 20. She worked in a recycling facility, sorting trash for 12 hours a day. But when she bonded with Storm, a young grey dragon, she discovered she could awaken dragons who'd been put into forced hibernation by Rita's forces. Dragons who'd resisted and been punished by being locked away in unconsciousness for decades. But they weren't warriors. That became obvious very quickly. They were normal people thrust into an impossible situation. Beth spoke for all of them during one of their planning meetings. "We can't fight an empire," she said, looking around their cramped ship where they'd all gathered. "Look at us. I process air. Tom hauls cargo. What are we supposed to do against Rita's armada? Against thousands of dragons who've been trained for combat since birth?" Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "We do what humans have always done. We adapt. We think differently than anyone expects us to." Ember, resting near the cargo door with several other bonded dragons, rumbled in agreement. "Dragons are powerful, but we think in straight lines. Honor. Individual combat. Ancient traditions. We're predictable. Humans see possibilities where we see limitations." "She's right," Grace added. Her eyes were distant, still connected to dragons across space. "We don't have to fight like dragons. We fight like humans who happen to have dragon partners." But while they trained and planned, Rita wasn't sitting idle. News began reaching them through stolen communications. Imperial forces were raiding frontier colonies, searching for people with what they called genetic anomalies. 3 potential binders were killed before they could be found and awakened. The Resistance watched the executions broadcast across the Imperial networks as warnings. Then everything got worse. Rita deployed something new. Something terrible. The Null Collars. They looked like the collars dragons wore already, but these were different. When activated, they severed the human-dragon bond instantly. Jack watched in horror as a bonded pair they'd just recruited screamed in agony when Imperial forces caught them. Both the human and dragon writhed on the ground, clutching at their heads as the connection between them was ripped apart. Some bonds were permanently damaged. Both species suffered. The device didn't just break the connection. It punished them for having it in the first place. "This is my fault," Jack said quietly, watching Luke try desperately to help the wounded pair. "If I'd just stayed hidden in those stables, none of this would be happening." Ash's presence filled his mind, firm and steady. Rita would have hunted binders regardless of whether you awakened. At least now they have a chance to fight back instead of dying in ignorance. Tom burst into the room, his face pale. "We intercepted something. Imperial communications. Rita's building a weapon." The holographic display showed complex schematics. Grace studied them, her expression growing more horrified with each passing second. "It's a genetic severance device," she finally said. "Galaxy-wide range. It'll permanently destroy the compatibility between human and dragon DNA. No binder could ever bond again." "And existing bonds?" Beth asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. "Would be torn apart," Ember said grimly. "Killing both partners in the process." "How long?" Jack demanded. Tom checked the data again. 72 hours until it's operational." The room fell silent. 7 binders, 12 dragons, and a handful of sympathizers against the entire Imperial fleet. The impossible had just become worse. The Imperial throne world of Draconis Prime blazed with artificial light, a planet transformed into a fortress. Somewhere in high orbit, the genetic severance weapon charged its final sequences. 60 minutes until activation. Jack's strike team consisted of 5 humans, 7 dragons, and a plan held together by desperation and hope. The other binders, Beth, Grace, and Tom, led separate teams targeting the weapon itself, navigating through Imperial defenses using every trick human ingenuity could devise. "Status," Jack said into his comm, pressed flat against ash scales as they dove through Draconis Prime's defense network. Energy blasts streaked past them in the darkness of space. Each one close enough that Jack could feel the heat even through the protective field ash generated around them. His heart hammered against his ribs. This wasn't like the training simulations. This was real. If they failed here, everyone with binder blood died. Every dragon in the galaxy lost their higher consciousness. Everything they'd fought for would end. "We're in," Tom's voice crackled back through the comm static made it hard to hear, but Jack caught the strain in his tone. "Reed's interfacing with their systems, but there's too much redundancy. We can't shut it down from here." Jack cursed under his breath. They'd known it wouldn't be easy, but hearing the confirmation still hit like a punch to the gut. "Grace, what's your status?" "Hitting resistance," Grace replied. Her breathing was labored. Jack could hear weapon fire in the background. "Imperial dragons are hesitating. They don't want to fight us. Rita's having to use those collars to force them. That was the one advantage they'd been counting on. Most dragons in the sovereignty weren't loyal to Rita by choice. They were enslaved by technology and 3,000 years of conditioning. When they saw free dragons and awakened binders, many simply refused to fight. Their instincts recognized what Jack and the others represented. The old bond. The partnership their ancestors had mourned for millennia. But Rita had prepared for that possibility. All teams, be advised, Anna's voice came through urgently. She was with the ground forces trying to create diversions. Rita's deployed modified soldiers. They're not fully human anymore. Genetic enhancements. They're cutting through our dragons like they're nothing. Jack felt his stomach drop. Where's Rita herself? Imperial Palace, center of the capital, Ash replied. The ancient dragon's voice resonated through their bond as much as through the air. His senses could pierce through the chaos of battle in ways human technology never could. She hasn't evacuated. She's waiting for us. It's a trap, Jack said flatly. Of course it's a trap, Ash rumbled. Jack felt a hint of amusement through their connection despite the dire circumstances. But it's also an opportunity. Rita's pride won't let her run. We can use that. The palace loomed ahead, growing larger as they descended. It was a massive crystalline structure that caught the planet's artificial lights and scattered them into 1,000 colors. Beautiful and terrible at the same time. The building looked big enough to house a small city, all sharp angles and gleaming surfaces that probably doubled as defensive shields. Ash didn't slow down. He tucked his wings and dove straight toward the largest window Jack had ever seen. Stained glass depicting Rita's dynasty in all their false glory. Hold on, Ash warned. They crashed through in an explosion of colored fragments. Glass shattered around them like a rainbow storm. Jack squeezed his eyes shut and held on as tightly as he could. They hit the floor hard, skidding across polished marble that cracked under Ash's weight. When Jack opened his eyes, they were in the throne room. Drake Empress Rita waited on her throne. She looked smaller than Jack expected. More human than dragon, though her scales were visible along her arms and neck. 6 massive war dragons flanked her, and something was wrong with their eyes. They looked dead. Empty. The null collars around their necks glowed with sickly green light. The stable boy, Rita said. Her voice was cold and sharp. You've caused me considerable inconvenience. Jack slid off Ash's back, keeping his hand on the dragon's scales to maintain their bond. His legs shook but he forced himself to stand straight. Call off the weapon. Free the dragons. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. Rita actually laughed. The sound echoed through the enormous chamber. You sound just like him. Like your ancestor who threw away everything we'd built together. Her expression twisted, and Jack saw something in her face that made him pause. Pain. Old and deep. Do you know what happened to the royal binder family? To the king who decided partnership was somehow wrong? You killed them, Jack said. 10,000 years ago. That's what Ash told me. No, Rita stood slowly. She removed her ornate helmet, and Jack finally saw her face clearly. His breath caught. Her features were too refined for a pure dragon. Her eyes held something no full dragon possessed. Human emotion. Human bitterness. I am them. What's left of them, anyway? Ash's shock reverberated through their bond so strongly that Jack stumbled. That's impossible. You're a dragon. Half, Rita said. Her voice carried centuries of pain. My father was the binder king. My mother was a dragon who loved him. I'm the only true hybrid ever created. Born from the covenant itself. Jack's mind raced. The record said. The records lie because I made them lie, Rita snarled. When my father chose to dissolve the covenant, to walk away from the dragons who'd served humanity faithfully, he walked away from me too. Half human, half dragon. Belonging nowhere. Rejected by the very bond that created me. Understanding crashed over Jack like a wave. You weren't trying to destroy the covenant. You've been trying to recreate it. But on your terms. Where you control everything. I built a world where belonging doesn't matter, Rita said. Where dragons serve because that's the natural order. Where humans submit because they're inferior. No painful choices. No rejection. Just certainty. That's not the covenant, Ash said. That's slavery. It's order, Rita countered. And in 20 seconds, it becomes permanent. Alarms blared through the palace. The weapon entering final activation. You can't stop it, Rita continued. Even if you kill me right now. I built redundancies into redundancies. The only way to stop it is from inside. Someone with full binder blood would have to enter the weapon's core and become the circuit breaker themselves. She smiled, and it was terrible. Which would kill them instantly. Through their bond, Jack felt Tom and Beth fighting desperately at the weapon's location. They'd reached the core, but energy shields protected it. Shields that would destroy any dragon trying to breach them. Only a human could enter. Only a binder could interface with the ancient technology inside. Jack looked at Rita. At this woman who was human and dragon, who'd been broken by being both and neither. "I'm sorry," Jack said quietly. "For what my ancestor did to you. For leaving you behind." For just a moment, something flickered in Rita's eyes. Something vulnerable. Then her expression hardened. 10 seconds. "Make your choice, binder." Jack closed his eyes and made his choice. Jack existed everywhere and nowhere. His consciousness had spread across the galaxy, connected to every dragon simultaneously through the weapon that was supposed to kill him. He could feel them all, millions of minds, ancient and young, enslaved and free, confused and hoping. And he understood. The weapon wasn't designed to sever the bond. It was designed to force it. Rita had built a machine that would make every dragon subservient to human will permanently, and kill any human with the strength to resist. A covenant without choice. Control wearing the mask of connection. Jack's physical body was somewhere inside the weapon's core, but he barely felt it anymore. His awareness stretched across impossible distances. He could sense a young dragon on a mining colony, confused and scared. An ancient dragon in deep hibernation, dreaming of the old partnership. A war dragon forced to fight, screaming silently inside his own mind while the null collar made his body obey. Each consciousness was unique. Each one carried its own memories, hopes, fears. And they were all about to be enslaved forever. Unless Jack did something. But what? The weapon's energy was building around him, through him. In seconds it would pulse outward, rewriting the genetic code of every dragon and human with binder blood. Rita had designed it perfectly. There was no off switch. No emergency shutdown. The only way to stop it was to become part of the circuit and burn out from the inside. Which would kill him. Jack felt ash in his mind, the old dragon's presence trying to anchor him, to keep his consciousness from dissolving completely into the vast network. "Jack, you must let go. Come back to your body. We'll find another way." "There is no other way," Jack said, though he wasn't sure if he spoke with his mouth or just thought the words across their bond. "This is it." Then something occurred to him. Something human. Something that dragons, for all their ancient wisdom, might never have considered. What if the weapon didn't have to be destroyed? What if it could be changed? Rita had built this machine using both human technology and dragon magic. It was a hybrid creation, just like Rita herself. And Jack was inside it, his binder blood interfacing with every system, his consciousness touching every circuit. The weapon was designed to force obedience. But what if he could make it do something else? "Tom," Jack said, his voice echoing across the communication network and through the dragon bond simultaneously. "I need you to trust me. When I say now, have Reed push every ounce of power into the weapon's core." "Jack, that'll overload it. It'll explode. You'll die. Or it'll give me enough energy to reprogram the whole thing," Jack replied. "Grace, I need you to coordinate every free dragon. Have them open their minds completely. No barriers. No defenses. If the weapon fires while they are vulnerable," Grace's voice was tight with fear. "Then we lose," Jack admitted. "But if we do nothing, we lose anyway. Beth, Anna, Luke, reach out to every human you can find with even a trace of binder blood. Have them touch the nearest dragon. Skin to scale. Right now." "What are you doing?" Ash's voice resonated with worry and wonder. "Something no binder has ever done before," Jack said. He could feel the weapon's countdown approaching 0. Feel Rita's programming trying to execute. "I'm giving everyone a choice. Now, Tom. Do it now." Tom and Reed dumped massive amounts of energy into the core. The weapon, designed to send out a pulse of genetic control, suddenly had more power than it was built to handle. Systems began to overload. Alarms screamed. The whole structure shook. And in that moment of chaos, Jack seized control. He was a stable boy who'd spent 3 years learning to be invisible. He wasn't a programmer or an engineer. But he had something Rita never did. He had hope. He had the belief that people deserved to choose their own fate. And he had the uniquely human ability to look at a tool built for one purpose and see a completely different possibility. Jack guided the overloading energy. Shaped it with human will and dragon wisdom. The weapon's programming fought him, trying to execute its original function. But Jack pushed back. He rewrote code with his thoughts. Redirected energy flows with his intentions. Used the very bond Rita wanted to corrupt as the key to transforming the weapon into something new. The pulse exploded outward. It touched every dragon in the galaxy. Every human with binder heritage. Every creature that had ever felt the faint echo of the ancient covenant. But it didn't control them. It didn't sever them. It didn't force anything. It offered a choice. For the first time in 3,000 years, every dragon in the sovereignty felt their free will completely restored. The null collars shattered into pieces. The genetic conditioning broke like glass. The crushing weight of Rita's empire lifted all at once. And Jack offered them a simple question that echoed through every mind. Do you want this? True partnership. True choice. The vulnerability of letting another species into your heart, knowing they could hurt you, trusting they won't. Do you want to try again? The response was overwhelming. Dragons across the galaxy reached out. Not to their owners. Not to their riders. Just to humans. Regular people living regular lives. And they asked the question that hadn't been asked in 10,000 years. Will you bond with me? Thousands said no. They wanted freedom, independence, the right to exist without any connection. And the humans respected that choice completely. But thousands said yes. Jack felt each bond form like a small son being born. Individual, unique, chosen freely by both sides. A farmer and a dragon who'd hauled freight. An engineer and a dragon who'd been a war mount. Children and young dragons, meeting for the first time without the weight of slavery crushing them. In the throne room on Draconis Prime, Rita collapsed. For the first time in her long, bitter life, she felt the covenant as it was meant to be. Not control, but connection. Her war dragons surrounded her, freed from their collars, making their own choice. You destroyed everything, Rita whispered. One of the war dragons, his name was Forge, lowered his head gently. No. He gave us back everything. Including you. You were born of the covenant but never got to choose it. You don't have to be alone anymore. Rita stared at him. You should hate me. Perhaps, Forge acknowledged. But right now, I choose to offer you partnership. Across the galaxy, the Empire dissolved. Not into chaos, but into choice. And Jack, pulled back into his body by Ash's steady presence, opened his eyes to see a new world being born. A world where humans and dragons chose each other. One bond at a time.